It's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when everything started to go wrong, but I can feel the weight of it all. The feeling that things were slipping through my fingers, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. My name is Jay Rodriguez, and I'm 40 years old. I've spent the last decade building my business from the ground up. It's a software development company that provides solutions for businesses, the kind of company that's supposed to grow with the digital age. But now it's a sinking ship. The global financial crisis has hit hard. I'm drowning in debt, and the contracts I relied on are slipping away like sand through my fingers. Every time I look at the numbers, it feels like the walls are closing in. Clients are backing out. Old investors have pulled their funding, and it seems like the worst decisions have come back to haunt me. But it's not just the business. It's everything. My life, my relationship with Amanda, the woman I once thought I could do anything with. That's the thing about hard times. They change people. They change relationships. And in my case, it seemed like everything was falling apart. Amanda, my wife. She's 35 now, and I've watched her change. Or maybe I should say, I've watched her disappear. She was once a model, full of life, ambition, and beauty. But that was before we settled into the routine of married life. Before she gave up her career to support me. Now she's a housewife, living in a world of endless shopping trips, luxury, and comfort. But even those luxuries are slipping away, and Amanda's not dealing with it well. I've noticed it for months now. The look she gives me when she thinks I'm not watching, the way she sighs at the mention of bills, how her smile feels more and more forced. She's a shadow of the woman I married, and I can't help but feel like I'm losing her. Then there's Ryan. Ryan Clark, my business partner. He's 38, sharp as a tack, and always knows how to make the right deal. He's the kind of guy who walks into a room and owns it, and I've always admired that about him. We've been working together for years, and in many ways, he's more than just a business partner. He's part of the family. Or at least, he was supposed to be. I was grateful when Ryan offered to step in and help with the crisis. Things were getting worse every day, and I was struggling to keep my head above water. Ryan started organizing meetings with investors, talking to banks, restructuring the company, and offering advice on every angle. The guy knows his stuff, and I thought, for a while, that maybe he could pull us out of this mess. But what I didn't see coming, what none of us saw coming, was how much he would start spending time with Amanda. It wasn't just about business anymore. He'd call her up to discuss numbers, and the next thing I knew, they were having dinner together, talking about dreams and ambitions. At first, I didn't think anything of it. Ryan's a charming guy. He's got that magnetism that draws people in. But Amanda, she started relying on him. More and more. She would tell me about their conversations, how he was so understanding, how he could see things from her perspective. She was lonely, she said. Lonely because I was always caught up in the business, always buried in spreadsheets and numbers, always stressed out and distracted. I tried to brush it off, told myself it was just the situation, that everything would get better once the business turned around. But deep down, I knew something was off. The small things. The way she started talking about Ryan like he was some sort of savior. The way she seemed so eager to spend time with him, to talk to him about things I should have been the one to listen to. I tried to dismiss it. I told myself it was just a phase, that I'd get things together and make everything right again. The truth is, I was so wrapped up in trying to save my company, trying to fix everything on my own, that I didn't see how much my marriage was falling apart. I was too focused on the numbers, on the deals, on the mountain of work that had consumed me. And she, Amanda, she was slipping away. Every day that passed, I felt like I was losing a little more of her. And then there were the arguments. The small, seemingly insignificant things that added up. It started with the little jabs, the passive-aggressive comments about my inability to fix things, about how I'd let everything fall apart. Then it escalated. One night, after another failed meeting with potential investors, she snapped. She threw the papers on the kitchen counter and looked at me with those cold, disappointed eyes. "I'm tired, Jay. I'm tired of pretending like everything's fine. We're sinking, and you're too stubborn to admit it," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "I'm doing the best I can," I shot back, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel the pressure mounting. "No, you're not. You're drowning in your own ego, and you don't even see it." She crossed her arms, pacing around the room. I'm not going to keep pretending that this is okay. Are you blaming me for everything? Is that it? I asked, my frustration bubbling up. You think I don't know how bad things are? I'm doing everything I can, but it's not enough for you, is it? No, it's not enough, she said flatly. I gave up my career for you, Jay. I supported you, believed in you. But now? Now you can't even look at me without resenting me for asking for more than just survival. That hit me harder than anything. More than the loss of clients. More than the failed meetings. Because at that moment, I realized something that I hadn't been willing to admit. It wasn't just the business that was falling apart. It was us. As the days went by, I started noticing things. Amanda's conversations with Ryan growing longer, her constant texts to him when I wasn't around. The way she would light up when she talked about him, about his advice, his support. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to see it. But I knew, deep down, something was shifting. Something was happening that I wasn't part of. And I had no idea how to stop it. But that's the thing about crisis. It doesn't give you time to think. It doesn't give you space to figure things out. It pushes you forward, faster and faster, until you're running blind. And I was running blind. In my business, in my marriage, in my life. I knew things were bad, but I had no idea just how bad they were about to get. Things took a turn for the worse after that argument. It's strange how small moments can snowball into something huge, like the flick of a match setting off a wildfire. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It wasn't just the weight of debt, clients leaving, or my frustration at feeling like I was losing control. No, it became about something more intimate, something more personal. The cracks in my marriage began to widen, and I didn't even realize it until it was too late. I remember that evening like it was yesterday. Another late night at the office. Another round of meetings that ended with nothing but more empty promises. I hadn't even realized how much time I had spent at work, how I was retreating into it like a lifeline. I didn't know that while I was drowning in my own problems, Amanda was sinking into something else entirely. Ryan had been spending a lot of time at the house lately, trying to help me with the business, offering advice, helping with restructuring. But this time was different. I didn't get home until late, and when I did, I found them sitting in the living room, talking. Ryan was leaning in, his arm casually draped across the back of the couch where Amanda sat. She looked so at ease, so comfortable with him. There was a softness in her face that I hadn't seen in months. It wasn't even like she was doing anything wrong. Not yet, anyway. They were discussing the business, but I could tell the tone had shifted. Ryan was being more attentive, more concerned, like he always did. But this time there was something else, something I couldn't put my finger on. The way Amanda was responding to him was different. She laughed at something he said, her eyes shining with a glint I hadn't seen in a long time. That spark, that connection, it was all directed at him. I'll just finish up a few things in the office, I said, trying to sound casual, but I could feel the tension creeping into my voice. Ryan glanced up at me, his smile a little too easy, a little too practiced. Sure thing, Jay. We'll keep it down. As I walked to the office, I could hear their voices growing quieter, but I didn't think much of it. I was too wrapped up in my own thoughts, too buried in my own problems. Later that night, I heard them talking again. This time, it was just the two of them, sitting in the living room with a bottle of wine. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the walls are thin, and I could hear the murmur of their conversation drifting down the hallway. Amanda's voice was softer than usual, almost like she was confiding in him, telling him things she couldn't tell me. I don't know what to do anymore, Ryan, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. I feel like I've lost myself. I don't even recognize the woman I used to be. All of this life we've built, it feels like it's slipping away, and I don't know how to stop it. Ryan's response was low, measured, like he was offering her the kind of advice that only someone who truly understood would give. You're not alone, Amanda. You don't have to figure everything out on your own. His voice was steady, comforting. I could hear it in the way he spoke, the way he was reassuring her, making her feel seen. That's when it hit me. I hadn't made her feel seen in a long time. What happened next wasn't planned. At least, not in the way I thought it would happen. That night, Amanda and Ryan ended up alone at the house long after I had retreated to my office, drowning in numbers. They stayed up late, talking about everything and nothing. And somewhere along the way, things shifted. It wasn't a single action. It was the accumulation of months of neglect, of loneliness, of pain that neither of us had fully confronted. I don't know exactly what was said, but I know what happened. I know that at some point, Amanda's vulnerability met Ryan's kindness, and something in her snapped. She kissed him. Just a soft, tentative kiss at first. Maybe just a way to feel something, anything. But once that line was crossed, everything changed. The kiss was just the beginning. What followed wasn't just a physical act. It was the culmination of years of emotional neglect, of longing, of searching for something more than what we had. Ryan wasn't just offering advice anymore. He was offering the attention she had been craving for months. And in that moment, she accepted it. I didn't know it then, of course. I had no idea that Amanda had crossed that line with Ryan. But what I did notice was the shift in her afterward. When she came to bed that night, her eyes seemed distant, like she was looking right through me. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could feel it in the way she moved, the way she looked at me, cold, like I wasn't even there. In the days that followed, Amanda seemed to change. She wasn't just distant. She was distant in a way that felt like she was shutting me out. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She wasn't angry with me, but she wasn't warm either. She became harder to talk to, harder to reach. And when I tried to discuss things, tried to reconnect, she would give me short answers or avoid the conversation altogether. It didn't make sense at first. I thought she was just frustrated with the business, with everything that was going wrong. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was something else going on, something I couldn't put my finger on. And then there were the moments that made me wonder if I was losing her to Ryan, to the man I had trusted like a brother. It's not like Amanda was outright disrespecting me. Not at first. She wasn't yelling or starting fights. But there was a coldness, a distance in her behavior that I couldn't ignore. And every time Ryan showed up, every time they spent hours together discussing business, I felt that distance growing. What was worse was that Amanda started justifying it. She wasn't outright saying anything, but I could see it in the way she'd speak about Ryan. How much she relied on him. How much she appreciated his support. How he was the one who understood her when I couldn't. She kept telling herself it was just about the business. But it was so much more than that. I could feel it. She had found someone else to turn to, and I was left alone, drowning in the wreckage of everything I had worked for, including the marriage I thought I could rely on. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in my chest, the one that whispered that something was off. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more it ate away at me. Because deep down, I knew things had already changed. The line had already been crossed. And now, there was no going back. It was a Saturday afternoon when everything came crashing down. Amanda had gone out for some shopping, and I found myself alone in the house for the first time in weeks. I don't know why I picked up her phone. Maybe I was just looking for something to do. Maybe it was an instinct, or maybe it was the nagging voice in the back of my head telling me to dig deeper. Whatever it was, I shouldn't have done it. But I did. And what I found was something I'll never forget. Amanda's phone was left on the kitchen counter. She'd been texting all day. Nothing unusual, I thought, until I saw his name. Ryan. Ryan Clark. My business partner. The man I trusted like a brother. I picked up the phone without thinking twice, my heart racing as I unlocked it. The first message made my blood run cold. It wasn't a simple business message. It was a flirtatious comment, something playful, something intimate. I opened the thread, and it all came rushing at me. The messages were damning, filled with longing, desire, and words that made it clear there was something more between them than just business. They spoke in a way I had never heard Amanda speak to me. She was telling him things she never shared with me. She was opening up in ways that made it clear their connection had gone far beyond what I had ever imagined. There was no mistaking it now. The betrayal was real. It wasn't just emotional. It wasn't just about conversations. They had crossed a line, and I had the proof in my hands. My hands were shaking as I read through the texts. It felt like a punch to the gut, a weight I wasn't prepared for. The world around me seemed to tilt as my heart dropped into my stomach. Every word was like a blade, slicing through my trust. She'd done it. She had betrayed me with him. Ryan, my business partner, the man who had been like family to me, had stolen something from me that I couldn't get back. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to process it. The pain was overwhelming, but so was the rage. I couldn't just sit here and pretend nothing had happened. I had to confront her. I had to confront them both. When Amanda got home, I didn't say a word at first. I just stood there, holding her phone in my hand. The silence between us was thick, suffocating. She knew something was wrong. She could feel it. The tension in the air was palpable. I didn't even let her speak before I exploded. You think I wouldn't find out? My voice was sharp, cutting through the silence. I trusted you, Amanda. I trusted you with everything. And you betrayed me with him? Her face went pale. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. She took a step back, and I could see the guilt and fear in her eyes. It didn't matter. The damage was already done. I didn't mean for it to happen, Jay, she said, her voice trembling. It just happened. Just happened? I laughed bitterly, feeling a surge of anger rush through me. You didn't just happen to fall into his arms. You didn't just happen to fall in love with him. This wasn't an accident, Amanda. This was a choice. I'm sorry, she said, her eyes welling up with tears. I never meant to hurt you. But you were so distant. You were always so caught up in the business. You stopped seeing me. You stopped caring about me. That was the moment the truth hit me. The truth that had been hiding in plain sight. She was right. I had been distant. I had been so consumed by the business, by the stress, by everything falling apart around me, that I didn't see her slipping away. I didn't notice her reaching out to someone else. And now it was too late. I've been working my ass off trying to fix everything. And this is how you repay me? I shouted. By screwing around with my business partner? She flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop. The anger was too much. You think Ryan's the answer? You think he is the one who can give you what you need? He's been using you, just like I have. The only difference is, he knows how to make you feel special while he stabs me in the back. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking, but I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep waiting for you to notice me. I was dying inside, Jay. Her words hit me like a slap. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to scream, wanted to lash out and make her feel the same pain I was feeling. But part of me, the part that still loved her, or maybe just the part that still wanted to believe in us, was crushed. I didn't know what to do with that part. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. The room felt suffocating, and I couldn't stay in that moment any longer. I don't know if I can do this anymore, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. I don't know if I can keep living like this. I turned away and walked out, leaving her standing there, her tears falling in silence. For days after that, I couldn't think straight. I couldn't focus on anything. The pain of betrayal was eating me alive, but it wasn't just the heartbreak that consumed me. It was the anger, the burning rage that had taken root inside me. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't just accept what had happened and move on. No, I needed to do something. I needed to regain control, and the only way I could think of doing that was by taking down the man who had destroyed everything I had worked for. I started making plans. I consulted my lawyers. I combed through every financial record I could get my hands on, looking for anything that would give me leverage against Ryan. I knew he'd been using the business's finances for his own gain. He had been taking advantage of the situation, making deals that benefited him at the expense of everyone else. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I began planting seeds of doubt among the investors, subtly suggesting that Ryan's financial practices might not be as clean as they seemed. I didn't care if I had to ruin him. I didn't care if it meant destroying everything. Ryan had taken something from me that I couldn't get back, and I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. The more I thought about it, the more it consumed me. I couldn't stop. The pain, the humiliation, the betrayal, they all fueled my obsession. The more I learned about Ryan's involvement in shady deals, the more I felt justified in my actions. I wasn't just hurting him. I was fixing things, making sure that no one else would ever be taken in by his charm again. But as the days passed, something else started to change inside of me. The more I focused on taking down Ryan, the more I became disconnected from Amanda. She tried to talk to me, to apologize, but I couldn't hear her anymore. I couldn't hear anything except my own rage. I couldn't feel anything except the need for revenge. Amanda had broken me, and now, I was determined to break him. The satisfaction I felt as Ryan's empire crumbled was something I had never experienced before. I had spent so much time being consumed by anger, by the need to make him pay for what he'd done to me, and now it was happening. His downfall was unfolding exactly as I had planned. It started with whispers, rumors that I carefully fed to the media. The financial reports that Ryan had been so careful to keep hidden were suddenly exposed. I leaked false information, twisted truths, and exaggerated details. The once confident man who had charmed everyone around him now found himself drowning in accusations of financial mismanagement and corruption. It didn't take long for the investors to catch wind of it, and once they did, they were gone. Fast. They pulled out, one after the other, as if they could smell the blood in the water. The company's stock plummeted, and I knew Ryan was scrambling to try to hold it all together. He started selling off assets, trying to salvage what was left. But I was always one step ahead. I knew exactly where the cracks were, and I made sure every attempt to fix things failed. The more desperate he became, the harder I pushed. It was like watching a man drown while I stood by, unbothered. His fall was inevitable, and I couldn't help but feel a twisted sense of satisfaction as I watched everything unravel. Within weeks, Ryan's business was in full collapse. His reputation was in tatters, and the investors who had once trusted him were gone. The company filed for bankruptcy, and Ryan was left with nothing. Nothing but the wreckage of his life, both professionally and emotionally. And me? I stood at the top, cold and unfeeling, holding the company in my hands. My business was secure. My financial future was guaranteed. But there was no real joy in it. No real sense of triumph. I had one, yes, but at what cost? Amanda, on the other hand, was a mess. She had watched as everything, the affair, the business, her marriage, all spiraled into nothing. The guilt was eating her alive. She tried to reach out to me, to explain, to apologize. She even came to me in tears, begging for my forgiveness. But I couldn't bring myself to care. Not anymore. I had nothing left for her. The woman who had torn apart everything we had built, the woman who had betrayed me with my own business partner, was the same one who now stood before me, broken and desperate. Amanda, stop, I said coldly one night as she sat across from me, tears streaming down her face. There's nothing left to say. You destroyed everything, and I'm not going to forgive you. Her voice shook as she spoke, her words laced with regret. I know I messed up, Jay. I was so wrong. But you don't understand. I felt so alone. I needed someone who saw me, who cared. I lost myself in you, in everything. And now I'm losing you for good. I don't know what to do. You should have thought about that before you slept with Ryan. I spat, the bitterness in my voice cutting through the air. You don't get to ask for forgiveness now. You had your chance, and you blew it. She stared at me, stunned by my coldness. Is this who you are now? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Someone who's so consumed by revenge that he can't even look at me? Someone who'd rather destroy everything than fix anything? I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but there was no room for her in my life anymore. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. It wasn't about the marriage anymore. It was about winning, and that was the only thing that mattered now. But despite my coldness, Amanda wouldn't give up. She attended therapy, tried to fix herself, to make sense of the chaos she had caused. She reached out again and again, asking for another chance, trying to rebuild something from the wreckage. But I wasn't interested. I couldn't bring myself to care. Every attempt she made to get close was met with indifference. I had already closed myself off from her, emotionally and mentally. She even went to Ryan. She found him, broke down in front of him, desperate to salvage something from the mess they'd made. But Ryan was a shell of the man he used to be. He had nothing left to give. He was emotionally bankrupt, just like his company. His bitterness toward both Amanda and me was palpable, and there was nothing left between them but the remnants of what had been. Despite all my manipulation, despite the victory I felt over Ryan, I was far from satisfied. The truth was, I had won the battle, but I had lost everything else. The emptiness began to settle in. I had taken down Ryan. I had secured the company, the financial stability I had been fighting for. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like an empty shell. The weight of everything I had done, the destruction, the manipulation, the lies, weighed on me like a ton of bricks. I had become someone I didn't recognize. The man who had once been driven by ambition, by love, by a sense of justice, had been consumed by bitterness and revenge. And now, I was left with nothing but the wreckage of my life. I started drinking more. I needed something to numb the pain, the regret, the emptiness that gnawed at me. At first, it was just a drink here and there to take the edge off. But soon, it became a way to escape. I found myself drowning in alcohol, hoping it would fill the hole inside me. It didn't. I spent my days lost in my own thoughts, unable to escape the realization that I had destroyed everything. I had destroyed Ryan, yes, but I had also destroyed the one thing that had once mattered more than anything else to me. My own sense of humanity. I had become the very thing I despised. Someone who would burn everything down just to watch the flames. It all came to a head one night, when Amanda came to the house one last time. She was broken, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and sorrow, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. Hope, maybe. She came to me with one last plea, one last apology. "Jay, please," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I know I can't fix what I've done, but I just want you to know how much I regret everything. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. I always have." I looked at her, the woman who had once been my everything, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just emptiness. "I don't want your apologies, Amanda," I said, my voice flat. "I don't want anything from you. This is over. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." She stared at me, the weight of what I had said sinking in. She knew. She knew it was done. There was no coming back from this. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't fight me. She didn't try to change my mind. She just nodded slowly, as if she understood that we were both beyond repair. And with that, she left. She walked out the door, and as I stood there, watching her go, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had lost everything. She was gone. Ryan was gone. And all that was left was a man who had destroyed his world out of spite. And in that moment, I realized nothing was worth it. Not the company, not the revenge. Nothing could fill the void I felt inside. Nothing could fix what had been broken. Ryan had no more fight left in him. Everything he had built, everything he had used to define himself, had crumbled to dust. His business was gone. His reputation was shattered. The affair, the betrayal, the web of lies. It had all led to this moment. He had lost Amanda, the woman he had once thought he could build a life with. And in the end, he had lost everything else too. With no clear direction, no ties left to the world he had known, Ryan vanished. He disappeared from the business world, retreating into the obscurity he had always feared. He moved to a small town far from the wreckage of his past life. It was a place where no one knew him, a place where he could attempt to rebuild from the ground up. Ryan took odd jobs, menial work that didn't require him to look back at the person he had been. He lived in a small, modest apartment, learning how to fend for himself in ways he hadn't had to in years. But even as the days passed, the scars of his betrayal, his failures, and his losses were always there. The bitterness toward me and toward Amanda remained deep in his bones, even as he moved forward. He began therapy, something he had avoided for so long, too proud to admit that he needed help. But now, it was the only path forward. Slowly, Ryan started to face the things that had driven him to this point. He acknowledged his role in the affair, the selfishness, the choices he made, and the harm he caused. He knew he could never fully recover from everything, but in order to move forward, he had to make peace with his actions. The journey was long and hard, but at least he was starting to face himself. As for me, I couldn't escape the reality of my own choices. After Amanda left, I was alone. Not just physically, but emotionally as well. I was surrounded by everything I had fought for. My company, once on the brink of failure, now thrived. The financial stability that had eluded me for so long was finally mine. I had rebuilt what I had lost in the business world, but it came at a steep cost. I had destroyed the love of my wife. I had shattered my own sense of self-worth in the pursuit of revenge. The satisfaction I once felt from seeing Ryan's downfall had faded. I was left with nothing but emptiness, an overwhelming void that I couldn't fill. I thought I had everything: power, control, success. But I realized too late that the things that mattered the most weren't the things I had fought for. The love I had once shared with Amanda, the trust we had built, the future we had dreamed of, all of that was gone. And it was gone because I had become obsessed with destroying everything in my path, without ever stopping to ask myself what I was really fighting for. I began seeing a therapist, someone to help me process the guilt, the trauma, and the loss that weighed me down. For the first time, I confronted the truth. My obsession with revenge was rooted in my own insecurities, my fear of losing control, and my inability to accept the cracks in my marriage. I had used Ryan's betrayal as an excuse to justify my own actions, as a way to prove to myself that I wasn't weak. But in the end, all it had done was destroy me, just as much as it had destroyed everything else. Amanda, too, was on her own path to healing, though it was far from easy. She had made her mistakes, and the weight of those mistakes was heavy on her shoulders. But unlike me, she didn't run from the consequences of her actions. She faced them head-on, taking the time to reflect on everything that had gone wrong. She moved out of our home, into a small apartment that symbolized a fresh start, a place where she could find herself again, separate from the life she had once known. She began therapy, trying to understand the emotional struggles that had led her to the affair, the emotional emptiness that had pushed her into someone else's arms. It was a long, painful process, but over time, she started to rebuild her sense of self-worth. Amanda didn't seek reconciliation with me. She knew that the damage was beyond repair, and that no amount of apology could undo what had been done. But she did begin to rebuild her life, piece by piece. She found support from other women who had faced similar struggles, and it gave her the strength to move forward. She didn't let the past define her, even if it would always be a part of her. She decided to pursue a career in a completely different field, something she had always wanted but had neglected for years. It was a way for her to regain her independence, to step into a new chapter of her life. She wasn't the same woman she had been when she married me, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. She was learning to stand on her own, and for the first time in a long time, she seemed to have a sense of purpose again. Years passed, and life moved on. My company continued to grow. I never forgot about Amanda, or Ryan, or the choices that had led to the mess we all found ourselves in. But over time, the pain faded. The bitterness, the anger, all of it softened. I thought about the past often, but I didn't let it consume me anymore. One day, I ran into Amanda. It was completely by accident, a random meeting in a small coffee shop. At first, neither of us knew how to react. The years had softened the edges of our pain, but it still lingered. We were different people now, shaped by the choices we had made, by the lives we had lived since we parted ways. We exchanged a few polite words, a brief, "How have you been?" But there was no rekindling of the old connection. It was too late for that. The love that had once existed between us was gone, replaced by something more complex, something quieter. There was no more anger, but there was no more love either. Just acceptance. We talked for a few minutes, but we both knew that the past was the past. There was no going back, no repairing what had been broken. We weren't the same people who had once stood together, full of hope and dreams. We were different now, shaped by our own journeys, scarred by the mistakes we had made. But somehow that was okay. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of peace. We had both moved on, and while we may never fully heal from the pain we had caused each other, we had learned to accept it. We had learned to live with it. Neither of us looked back as we left the coffee shop. Our paths had diverged long ago, and now, we were just two people who had once been a part of each other's lives. We had fallen, and we had rebuilt, but we were no longer defined by the past. Sometimes, healing comes only after everything falls apart. And for the first time, I understood that.